In Moscow, as autumn settled over the Kremlin, President Vladimir Putin delivered a message that rippled through capitals worldwide. He declared that Russia would continue to respect the central restrictions of the New START Treaty, the last surviving nuclear arms control pact between Moscow and Washington, for just one more year beyond its February 2026 expiry. In his own words, Putin stated, "Therefore, Russia is ready to continue to adhere to the central quantitative restrictions under the START Treaty for 1 year after February 5, 2026. The statement was brief, just seconds long, but its implications stretch far beyond the Kremlin's gilded halls. For more than a decade, New START has been the thin line separating the nuclear giants from an open-ended arms race. It capped deployed warheads at 1,550 each and limited delivery systems, missiles, submarines, bombers, to 700. These are numbers that matter because behind every statistic lies the destructive capacity to end civilization. This treaty was never about friendship. It was about survival. At its core, New START offered predictability, an assurance that both sides would know within an agreed framework how much nuclear firepower the other possessed and deployed. It provided transparency through inspections, data exchanges, and verification, ensuring that deterrence did not spiral into paranoia. But treaties are fragile. One by one, the arms control architecture that emerged from the Cold War has collapsed. The Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, gone. The Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, gone. The Open Skies Treaty, gone. What remains is a single accord, new START, facing its expiration date. Putin's extension buys time, but only a year. A pause button, not a solution. To understand the gravity, one must look back. During the Cold War, the nuclear standoff was existential. In Reykjavik in 1986, Reagan and Gorbachev stared into the abyss and flirted with the idea of total disarmament. The subsequent START agreements and their successors were products of this fear and this hope. They brought ceilings, not zeros, but they offered predictability where chaos once reigned. By offering only one more year of adherence, Putin signals both caution and leverage. On one hand, Moscow knows an unconstrained arms race is costly, especially while it manages regional wars, sanctions, and economic isolation. On the other, the Kremlin seeks to pressure Washington, either come to the table on Russia's terms or face the end of the last nuclear guardrail. In Washington, the response has been wary. Officials call the move a window, not a solution. The Biden administration, wrestling with domestic political turbulence and foreign policy crises, faces a strategic dilemma. Should the United States invest in salvaging arms control with an adversary accused of breaking international law elsewhere, or prepare for a post-treaty world where restraint vanishes altogether? NATO allies view Putin's words with skepticism. For Brussels and Berlin, the Russian announcement is welcome only insofar as it avoids immediate collapse. Yet many suspect the extension is more about optics than genuine restraint. After all, Russia continues to modernize its nuclear arsenal. It boasts of new systems, the Sarmat intercontinental missile, the Avangard hypersonic glide vehicle, the Poseidon nuclear-powered torpedo, each designed to outmaneuver existing defenses. The United Nations Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, has repeatedly warned that without new agreements, the world risks a nuclear arms race without rules. For Europe, still scarred by the war in Ukraine and shaken by missile tests across its eastern border, the idea of nuclear brinkmanship returning to the continent's doorstep is terrifying. But this story is not just about Washington and Moscow. There is a third shadow looming: China. While not a party to New START, Beijing is rapidly expanding its nuclear stockpile, constructing missile silos across its western deserts, and developing new delivery systems. The United States has long argued that any future framework must include China, while Russia insists bilateral treaties remain the foundation. The Kremlin's one-year offer may be a way to buy time before a three-power negotiation becomes unavoidable. Domestically, Putin's move also plays well. By positioning Russia as the responsible actor, willing to show restraint even as it accuses the West of aggression, the Kremlin casts itself as a guardian of global stability. The message to Russian citizens is clear. While the West arms itself, Russia remains principled and strong, never reckless. Yet beneath this veneer lies a different calculation. A one-year extension places pressure on Washington just as a new US presidential term begins. It forces American leaders to act quickly, either to secure a new deal or to risk entering a world with no legal caps on nuclear weapons for the first time in over half a century. The stakes are immense. Without a treaty, both nations could, in theory, expand their arsenals without restriction. Russia could move to deploy thousands more warheads. The United States could accelerate its modernization programs, funding new submarines, bombers, and intercontinental missiles. Each step would feed into the other, reviving a cycle of competition that once bankrupted the Soviet Union and terrified the world. The humanitarian consequences are rarely spoken aloud, but they hang in the background of every discussion. Experts estimate that even a limited nuclear exchange would kill tens of millions in hours and plunge the planet into a nuclear winter. Crops would fail, global temperatures would fall, and famine would spread. The idea of returning to unconstrained stockpiles is not merely a policy issue, it is an existential threat to humanity. That is why arms control, however imperfect, has mattered for decades. It is not about trust. It is about mechanisms that prevent accidents, miscalculations, or misinterpretations from spiraling into catastrophe. It is about hotlines that remain open when diplomacy collapses elsewhere. Putin's announcement, then, is neither pure concession nor empty bluff. It is a maneuver in a grand game of pressure and persuasion. Russia, beset by sanctions and conflicts, gains an image of responsibility. The United States, grappling with multiple crises, faces a choice: negotiate or prepare for escalation. The rest of the world waits anxiously, knowing that its fate, too, is tied to this decision. As the countdown to February 2026 begins, the international system finds itself at a crossroads. Will the great powers step back from the brink and preserve at least a framework of restraint, or will they tumble into a new era of unbounded nuclear rivalry? The clock is ticking. 1 year may sound like time enough, but in the slow grind of diplomacy, in the tangled web of elections, alliances, and military programs, 12 months is little more than a heartbeat. The story of New Start is ultimately the story of human survival in the nuclear age. And as we move closer to its expiry, the question grows louder. Will leaders rise to the occasion, or will history repeat its most dangerous patterns? For now, Vladimir Putin has offered the world a pause. Whether it becomes a chance for renewal or merely a prelude to collapse remains uncertain. The world is watching. The future is waiting.